I am Anil Kumar, and in this video we'll try to understand how to write equation of a trigonometric function from the given graph. Question here is, determine the equation of trigonometric function from the graph. Now if you look at the graph, it could be written as a sine or a cosine function. So in general, equation of a sine function could be y equals to a times sine k x minus p plus q, or we could also write this as y times a cos k times x minus p plus q, right? So both these equations are possible for the given graph. Now to get the equation, what we need, steps are, first find the maximum. So we have maximum of 3, so write that down. Maximum is 3, minimum minus 1. From maximum and minimum you can get the value of a and q, and then we look for time period, right? So the time period for this is, since we know maximum and minimum, so the time period is twice difference between these two times, right? So the interval between maximum and minimum is 2 pi, right? So that is half the time, correct? So this basically is half the time period, correct? So we'll multiply this by 2, that is 2 pi. So we get 4 pi as the time period for one wave, right? Half wave is within 2 pi. Now from the time period we get the k value. So k is 2 pi by t, which is 2 pi by 4 pi, which is half in this case. So we know now k for each one of them. As I said, for maximum minimum we can get amplitude and the vertical translation, or the axis. Now the amplitude A can be calculated as difference in maximum minimum divided by 2, right? So in this case it is 3 minus 1 divided by 2, and that gives you a value of 3 plus 1 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. Axis Q we can calculate as maximum minus average value, maximum plus minimum divided by 2. Now in this particular case it is 3 plus minus 1 divided by 2, which is 1. Now once we know the axis, it is a good idea to always sketch the axis. Now in this case it is at 1, so that is the axis. So let's just sketch it. There you go. So that is the axis for the wave. Now, so we know amplitude, we know axis, and k. What remains is p. Now the value of p is very specific for sine and cosine. When you're looking at a cosine function, it actually starts like this, from a maximum. Now when you're looking for a sine function, it starts from the axis, correct? The 0 value. Now, let me show you with the help of coordinate system here. So if that is the equation, it is, and this is for cosine. Now in our case what we see here is, if I'm writing a cosine function, it is kind of starting from minimum. So we could use minus cos, or if we consider that point, then horizontally it has been translated by 2 pi. So there are two options for the cosine functions, phase shift, right? So let me write down both the equations for cosine function, right? So my equations could be y equals to, I know a is 2, right? Cos k value is half x. If I'm using this point, then it has been translated 2 pi units to the right. So cosine starts from the maximum. So we can say minus 2 pi, right? And plus 1 the axis. If I use this point, I could write this as also minus of 2 cos half x. Do you understand? Plus 1. So that ways I get two equations for cosine functions from this graph. Similarly, I can also find two equations for the sine graph. Now when I am considering the sine graph, in that case we have to look for a point from where it starts to rise from the axis. So that is the point which is shifted pi units to the right. So as far as the sine function is concerned, I could write this as y equals to 2 sine half, rest all parameters are exactly same, x minus pi, since it starts after pi units, and vertical axis shift is plus 1. So that is how you could go for sine, right? If you want to write this as a negative of sine, you could consider this point, correct? So I'm leaving that to you. Anyway, so these are different ways in which you can write equation of a trigonometric function from the given graph. So have a good look at it, and I hope that helps. Thank you and all the best.